Hello, and welcome to another edition of Turning Pages. I'm your co-host, Paul Brogan, who, along with my co-host, Margaret Porter, bring you information, stories, and fascinating people that are about more than just books. You'll find out anything and everything that you might want to know about the world of literature on this show. Margaret has her 17th book coming out in just a couple of weeks, and I will let her introduce our two guests today. Margaret?
Thank you, Paul. It's good to have you back in the studio after a couple of months off. Today we're talking about books, but we're also talking about history, local Concord history and New Hampshire history. And we have with us today two New Hampshire authors. We have Amanda Grappone Osmer and Kathleen Bailey. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're delighted to have you. Kathleen, this is your second, third, I don't even know how many times you've been on.
It's my third for Turning Pages, and
you've been on
fifth for things that
Paul does. Yeah, yes.
I am delighted to be here.
It's good to have you back, and welcome, Amanda. We're so happy to have you here.
Absolutely.
So the books that we're talking about today, we've got a multitude of books to talk about.
We do.
Amanda is the author of, just released in March, I think?
It was last November.
Last November. Kathleen's was released in March. Sorry about that. Grappone Automotive, The Founding, which is a history of the Grappone family, more so actually, I guess, than even the automotive company, because you take your family from their origins in Italy to their time of immigrating here to the United States, and it is just a wonderful read, and I found it so fascinating in many ways. But my first question for you is that at the start of the book you have this Grappone and Orlando family tree, which is quite extensive. How long did it take you to build this, and where did you find all of the information to put it together?
Great questions. I started a few years ago, probably in 2021, 22, doing some more research through Ancestry.com. That's been the easiest place for me to access information. And it became clear when I decided to write a book that I would need a little bit of help, especially on the Italian side, because as you can see in the intro, it goes back on the Grappone side to 17-something, 30.
Yeah.
So I did actually hire Ancestry.com. That's a service they have where you can hire them to go and do things abroad for you, which is helpful because they have Italian-speaking people on the ground, and they were able to come up with some of those documents. And then I also found a distant relative of mine in southern Italy, and that's described in the book how I found him. That was a fun story. And he was able to kind of fill in a couple of the blanks as well. So it took, I didn't work on it tirelessly for the past 3 years, but just, dribs and drabs. When I had a little time, I'd kind of pick away at it. So it was probably a few months in total.
Well, the result is most impressive, and we will get to that. Kathleen's book, which came out in March, I think, I knew somebody's did, is called A History Lover's Guide to New Hampshire. And Kathleen and her late daughter, Sheila, wrote this book, as they've done several others. And the prior book was growing up in Concord, New Hampshire, so that was Concord specific. But the History Lover's Guide covers the whole state of New Hampshire, and so many interesting facts and many interesting stories. So I want to know, Kathleen, do you have a favorite story or anecdote from the book?
Well, the thrust of the book, the through line, the leitmotif, if you would, is that people in New Hampshire don't think like other people. And a lot of my stories hone in on that fact. I have two favorites. One of them is the story of the town of Bethlehem and how they embraced the Jewish people. Bethlehem was a haven for Jews from the turn of the century. First they came up because the clear mountain air gave them relief from hay fever. And who wanted to be stuck in stinking Brooklyn or Bronx in the summer? Then they came up for the Grand Hotel era, where they called it the Catskills North. Harry Belafonte performed there, Zero Mostel performed there. A lot of the Catskills comics performed there. and that was huge. And then in recent years, they've embraced the Hasidic community. So I find that impressive, not as a story per se, but as the idea that the children of Abraham find a home with people who say "Ayah" and wear flannel.
But it is called Bethlehem, so
It is, Margaret.
Yes.
it kind of works.
Yes.
It is. And my other favorite is the baseball story in Nashua, where the Nashua Dodgers were actually the first minor league team to integrate a year before Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
And they just did it. That's how we do things in New Hampshire. We don't talk about it, we just do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of dovetails with Amanda's story,
Mm-hmm.
because her great-grandparents were immigrants and they came here and they were accepted. My grandparents were French Canadians. They came here, they were accepted. We're a lot more open-minded than people think we are.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to have something worth opening for.
Mm-hmm. Very true, very true. Well, it's a fascinating book. It really, as have been all of your nonfiction. Your fiction, you started with doing fiction after 40 years in journalism. And then, of course, with the Exeter book was your first book of
Yes.
the nonfiction genre. And then you moved from there to the War Monuments, then the Growing Up Concord, and now this latest one, The History Lover's Guide. And so your love for the state comes through in every page and every story. It's obvious that you're loving having the opportunity to share with your readers pieces of the state, city, whatever, that everyone may not know, but will come to love because of the way you lovingly tell it and share it. And that's what comes through in the latest book too. Mom is reading that and loving it, and
We are not like other people.
no, we're not. We're very
That's good.
unique. It is.
Amanda, in your book, you use a lot of history to give context, and you weave it in extremely well.
Oh, thank
You referred to Henry Ford's Model T, the Black Hand in Italy, the effects of the Spanish flu epidemic, and Prohibition, and all of those things, so that it orients the reader in the periods about which you're writing, and some of it your ancestors had specific experience with, and others it was just provided as background information. Like Henry Ford's Model T shows up before they get involved with the
little
automotive
foreshadowing.
industry. It's foreshadowing for those of us who know, which
Yes,
is everyone in Concord, of course. So how and where did you do that kind of background research?
Oh, I just read a lot and watched all the Ken Burns documentaries.
Oh, there you go.
Because he's a person who I trust that he has done the research and it's accurate, and it's going to be a balanced telling of how things were. So I've spent a lot of time. Also, it was interesting watching the PBS show with Henry Louis Gates Jr.,
Yes.
Finding Your Roots.
Oh, sure.
Because even though not everybody had a Southern Italian story, the ones who did were interesting to me, obviously, because that's where my family's from. But just the pattern and looking for, if you watch enough of those shows, you can see the research methodology, and you can kind of pick up some tips about how to go about doing it. So that was helpful to do that. But just reading a lot of books and refreshing my own memory, because it's been a long time since I learned about all of the things like Prohibition, and I was surprised to relearn, I guess I'll have to call it, that you could consume alcohol, you just couldn't make it or sell it.
Right, and the part about the Codzi family doing wine and
Yes.
grappa in the basement on, what was it, Walker Street or somewhere.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's like, okay, this is a part of Concord history that maybe people never knew or
Yes.
don't really know. So it was really fun and interesting to
That
read
was
about
another wonderful set of resources, is the Historical Society, New Hampshire Historical Society. They had actually, at some point, somebody had sat and interviewed one of the Cozy sisters, and that's how I got that information, because my family never left a written record. So it was really helpful to be able to identify a family that lived at the exact same time on the exact same street and hear about their Italian Christmas celebration and their bootlegging and all the other things they did. Yeah, so without people sitting down and doing this recording and documenting, none of this exists. So that's why it was important to me that I could help tell a story, mostly for my team. You know, the introduction of the book is I wrote it for my team members, and it was written to commemorate our 100th anniversary. I actually was able to print it the day before the 100th, which was not the
good
plan,
timing.
just so you know. But it did get printed in time, and it was handed out on the official 100th anniversary day. So that was why I wrote it. But I think it's of interest to other people too, because it's got some good Concord stories in there.
It is. I mean, as long as I can remember, the name Grappone has been a part of my life. And my parents, you know, when I was growing up, we're going to go to Grappone to get a car. And it was just a given that that's what you did. And you knew they were honest, trustworthy, they would give you a great deal. And there was just, it was a part of the community that was very important.
I love those stories.
My parents
Still is.
probably knew your grandparents.
I bet they did.
Concord was so much smaller
Yes.
those days.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, yeah. They lived on Walker Street, and then Ridge Road. When they got a little bit more advanced in their years, they had a family move to Ridge Road. But yeah, it's true. We still have people come in to the Ford store today and tell stories about back when I bought my first car in 1962 from your grandfather. And yeah, it's fun.
Well, Teresa Canton's at the Concord Theater
Yes.
owner, her sister Lori worked for Grappone
Yes.
for many years,
Yes.
loved it,
Yes.
and even, you know, up to the time of her passing in the early 90s, said that that was the most wonderful job I ever had, because she said everyone felt like a family.
Yeah.
And they said they just took you in and made you feel valued.
Yeah,
And
that's
she said
I love hearing that, because that's exactly what we try to do every day still, and it's a testament, I think, to all the previous generations that
Yes.
you know, and there's a theme through my book as well, as you know, Emanuela, who's my great grandmother, she was really the backbone of the family in a lot of ways, and it'll come out in the second book, some of the more scandalous things that her husband did, but you can the more foreshadowing in the first book there about his behavior and his, I don't know, inability to lead in a way that he could be proud of, but she was always, everything came back to her in terms of keeping people fed and clothed and upbeat, and I wish I had met her. She passed away in 1960, and I was born in the 70s, but she's, to me, the hero of the story. Without her, I truly think none of this exists, what we have today.
Wow.
Kathleen, I have a question about the process. You and Sheila worked on this together, and obviously the photographs, you went back to the location. So did you complete the manuscript and know what you were going to write about for each section, and then do a driving tour and go around the state to get the photographs? Or was it?
No, I pretty much got the photographs when I was writing. The ones by her were ones that she shot before she got ill. So I went into her archives. I went into my father's archives. My father was a photographer in Concord in the 50s and 60s. And I really love the Smithsonian Institution and the National Archives. I got a lot of good stuff from them that my father or Sheila didn't have. So it was kind of a magpie thing. I would pull from here and pull from there and get what I needed.
Well, the one highly recommended aspect of the book is that you have sections at the end where there's the how to get there part, which offers information on doing the driving tour. You could just follow along and visit all of these places.
I wanted to do that, Margaret, because I was afraid people would buy the book that were not familiar with New Hampshire.
And that may well happen if they're visiting for the summer or skiing in the winter and
Yeah.
see it and are interested. But as a tourism guide, it is a wonderful thing. And then you also have a listing of fairs and festivals and events as well at the back of the book, which I can recommend because it's quite comprehensive.
Yes.
I love a good appendix.
Well, but the structure of it is just it's really well organized. And easy to follow and entertaining as well.
Thank you.
And your collaborations with Sheila have been wonderful. They really, the two of you created some must-read books that are just so valuable and just filled with the love that you both had for each other, but also for your readers, what
We
you
had
were
so much
creating.
fun.
And the communities
Yes,
of
yes.
New Hampshire, especially Concord, for sure. Yeah. Amanda, the aspect that might surprise people reading your book about the Grappone family is the stone quarrying and stone cutting part of your family and their origins there, the Vermont and New Hampshire industries, which still goes on today up on Rattlesnake Hill. And so because Grappone is associated with automobiles, it might be a surprise about the stonework, but the research into that aspect of New England culture and industry was really interesting. And then there's a photograph of a portal that was carved by your ancestors, and how you must feel to have that photograph and that evidence.
That was one of the finds from my distant cousin, and the story there is we had an Italian exchange student last year, and I don't know anybody in the south of Italy whatsoever, and he's from the way northern part of Italy, right on the Austrian border. So far north he speaks German. That's how northern Italian he is. So I got to know him, and he's a very outgoing kid, and I said, you know, do you have like a parent who's as outgoing as you are, who wouldn't mind just picking up the phone and calling southern Italy and looking for a Grappone? And they did. And so his dad travels for work, and he's pretty well connected, but I mean, he did not know anybody in this town of Gesualdo, which is where the story starts. And he managed to find my distant cousin. We're related, I think. His third great-grandfather is my fourth great-grandfather. That's how we meet up on the tree. His name is Rossano, is the nice way of saying it. Rossano is how I will say it, so people don't think I'm pretentious. So he located him, Rossano Grappone, lives in Gesualdo, same exact place my second great-grandfather, who emigrated to the U.S., lived. And there are Grappones going back at least to 1730 in Gesualdo, and they were all stone cutters, all stone masons of some sort. So that was where I got a lot of the Italian information, actually all of the Italian information from him. And then I just, researching on this side of the pond, I did not know really how deeply involved they were in trying other businesses before they got into the gas station. And it was Rocco, my great-grandfather, and two of his brothers. They kind of they followed Frank, the oldest one, around because he's the oldest, so that's what you do in an Italian family. You do what the oldest one says. But they didn't get along. They didn't do business well together. In the second book, their stories will unfold a little bit more. Carmine, the third brother, is pretty tragic life, and I found some shocking news out about him and his family I actually swore out loud in a public library. But
Wow.
I was like, oh.
That's telling. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so you'll have to read the second book. But so it was just really, I mean, I felt so attached to these people because through all their records, I could see, were they living in a tenement house, how many people were smushed into one small space, and how frequently they had to move from place to place to place. And they just couldn't, they were so, I don't know that they were necessarily itinerant, but it felt that way, just reading about all the different places they lived, and the census data was priceless. I mean, that's where I got just about all my information.
You can track down anybody using
Yeah,
that.
so that was really pretty fun going down those rabbit holes. But then, I don't know if you have this problem, but I love to research. And at some point, I'm like, I got to stop
gotta write the
researching and
book,
start writing something, because I'm not paid to research.
Exactly.
I'm paid to do my actual job, which is not writing books. So.
Rabbit holes are really an issue.
Oh,
with me.
yeah. for
I can
sure.
say they're fun.
It's active, and you learn things, and some of which, depending what kind of books you're writing, you can't even use it all, but it makes for good conversations
Yes,
and
absolutely.
presentations. The Kathleen, of interest, I think, probably to Concord readers, is your writing about the Pierce homestead in Hillsborough and Franklin Pierce and the Pierce Brigade here in Concord.
And the statue at the State
and the statue at the so there's a lot of Pierce
Well, you see, Margaret,
part of it.
my point of that is, again, we don't think like other people. Because all over the country, people are smashing statues, people are flinging paint on the historic homesteads of Confederate generals, and we don't do that here. We don't really like Franklin Pierce. We don't like what he stood for. He was not a great president.
But he was very handsome, always on the list of the handsomest
Yes,
presidents.
exactly.
But we don't demonstrate, we don't fling paint on the historic homesteads. We don't deface his statue or call for the statue to be taken down. Once in a while at Halloween, a kid puts a pumpkin on it. They do that to Daniel Webster too, so they may, right? But what we do when confronted with something unpleasant is we walk around it, we kick its tires, we think it through, and then we determine never to make the same mistake again. If Pierce was running for election today, he would not be elected. If he wrote an op-ed for the Concord Monitor or the Union Leader, it would be savaged, because we know better. We learn from our mistakes and we move on. And that's another New Hampshire characteristic. We don't tear down statues because we don't have to. We learn from them.
Well stated.
Absolutely. Very much so. Amanda, was it satisfying writing this as far as the writing part? Once you had gotten all of the research and knew what you were doing?
Yes.
The actual writing, did you enjoy doing
I did. I did. I've never written a book before, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I just figured, you know what, it's the story, and we haven't talked at all about it, but one of the reasons why I knew I had to write this is because of this mysterious document that surfaced. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I won't ruin it for everybody, but this a relative of mine back in the 70s sat down and just wrote out a whole bunch of information about the founding of Grappone. He didn't call it that, obviously, but it was like how they got to opening the gas station and what life was like and all that in the early years of Grappone. And once that document surfaced, and to this day, nobody knows where it came from. It just appeared at work, and the person who wrote it is long dead. The two people who wrote it, he and his sister. And so when that came into my life, I was like, you know, that's a sign. Somebody wants me to write this book, because I knew I wanted to write it. And with the 100th anniversary coming, I thought, well, we'll just do like a little pamphlet. I didn't want to call it a book, because that's way too much pressure. Because everybody's like, it's like, did you have your baby yet? It's like, no, the book's not done. So I didn't want to call it a book, but eventually I was like, okay, I'm admitting it. It's an actual book, and I need to set aside some time to write it. And I was able last year to work from home a little bit and just kind of focus on that, which was a huge gift. My team at work they don't miss a beat when I'm not. They don't even know I'm here. I'm kidding. They do. But I have an amazing team, and they just keep the operation going, and I don't need to be there every minute of every day. It helps not to be a micromanager, you know. Yeah, so having the time to write was a lot of fun. I wish I could do it more. Yeah, now that I've done it.
Well, the book is so much a chronicle of Italian immigration in the 19th century, and the contributions made, and the way of living, but the sequence, the immigration sequence of the family in the past generations. How aware were you of that before you started the research? None of it. So it all came through.
And
what you and Ancestry concocted.
Pretty much. And my grandfather always told me the same handful of stories over and over. So I had a sense that his own grandfather had been kidnapped in Italy, and that's why his mom and the rest of the family had to flee. That he was ransomed, and it was a Black Hand gang. And, you know, growing up, I had all of these. I was like, you know, I guess I had a sense for what the story was, but until I started researching it to try to actually prove it out, I didn't. I learned a lot. I didn't know any of what I learned. Those are the kind
of stories that are going to get handed down, for sure.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely. Kathleen, were there any parts of the History Lover's Guide to New Hampshire that, or were there things that got left out that you wish could have gone into the book, but because there was a word limit restriction that you didn't get in, that you remember, or anything that you
remember,
anything that you debated whether or not it should go in, or were you pretty clear?
No. Margaret, I've done so many of these books that when I had the concept, I knew what I wanted, and that was that. It doesn't always work out that way, but I had it.
Well, and it's different from the Concord book, because that was your own experience of growing up in Concord, and and the stories and the activities and the things that happen here in Concord that make Concord Concord.
Yes.
Margaret, me and 200 other people. It was not a memoir, it was a themoir.
Yes. Oh, that's yes, it is.
very good.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. Well, I think it should be required reading for anyone who lives in Concord to
Yes,
know
absolutely.
what we have still today that has always been happening and continues, and then what has died out. You know, Paul's book about the Concord Theater and his book about growing up in Concord and living in Concord as well. It captures and preserves.
Sweetie, I wasted half my life in the Concord Theater.
Well, that's not waste when you're watching movies. No, definitely not. But that, you know, those kinds of stories I think are really important because it helps, it serves the identity of the city for one thing, but it also makes people who are transplants, like me, have a better appreciation for
It's
An
a different
understanding
the
world.
city.
of what?
An understanding. Don't
It
you
really
think?
is, yes, I agree, totally. And Amanda's book is certainly deserving to be right up there at the top of the list too, because really, again, Grappone is such a name, but nobody really knows the story. Now they
I
get
didn't
an
even know the
idea.
story.
Exactly. And it's fascinating. There's not a dull paragraph in there. I mean, it's all so important.
You're writing the introduction to my next book, Paul.
So, no, it's wonderful. We hope there'll be a book too. at
Oh,
some
yeah.
Yeah,
point.
speaking
It's
of
in
the
the
next
works,
book,
yes.
so will that carry the Grappone story up from 1923 up to the present time, or
Yes.
will there be a third book? You'll try to do it all in one?
Well, that book was supposed to be 1924 to 2024, and it would have been all nice and neat with a bow on it. And here's our history, everybody. But then as I started writing, I realized, oh gosh, there's such a story to even get to the point where
I'm
they
so
were
glad you
able
did.
to afford a gas station.
Yes.
That's the first book, and I have to credit my husband because one day, it was probably March of last year, and I'd given myself to the 1st of May, basically, to finish the rough draft. And I was still about 80 years from the finish line. And he looked at me one day and he's like, if this is such an important project to you, why are you rushing it? And I was like, oh, you just saved me so much stress. Thank you. I'm ending the book right now because I'm already at 1924.
Yeah.
And the next book will deal with 1924 to 2024. Well, I mean, to present day, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't see it needing to be, the third book might be, if people had an interest in it, something about the running of a business, generally speaking, as opposed to not just family business, but, you know, lessons learned and things like
Well,
that.
that could be useful and valuable to entrepreneurs
Absolutely.
and other business owners, I
It
would
could
think.
be. And Kathleen, on the horizon for you?
Nothing right now. I'm taking a break. Nothing in the nonfiction. I have a fiction book coming out in August. So I keep my options open.
Well, you've been so prolific. You deserve to take a
Yeah.
break.
Yes.
Margaret, I was first published when I was 69.
That's amazing.
So it's like 11 books in 5 years.
That's wonderful. That's
That is.
incredible.
That is.
Yeah.
I did stop to eat.
We all have to stop to eat, yes. Amanda, you've got an event coming up at the Concord Public Library on, is it April 29th, I
Yes.
think? Yes, and so you'll be doing a presentation on, or
Yeah.
a discussion and taking
Yes.
questions and everything.
Yep.
So please, if you see this between now and the 29th, be sure to check it out, go to
Check
the
it out,
library, support
absolutely.
our wonderful library and Amanda's book. Kathleen, you mentioned the part about the tourism in the North Country and the Jewish settlement in Bethlehem and the way that that wonderful camp came about. Who were your sources on those stories, and how did you gather the information?
David Gladstone, who is the current president of the synagogue, Claire Brown, who is the president of the Historical Society, is not Jewish, but she remembers that era because she grew up there, and Linda Herman, whose parents owned the Sinclair Hotel, one of the Catskills North hotels. Also books and other sources, and online, but those were the people I spoke to.
And one of the incidents or episodes or monuments in the book is the chicken farmer rock.
I had to end with that.
Of course you did. I mean, that's so New Hampshire. But do you have any insider information on who the perpetrator and who the chicken farmer are?
Nothing said in granite, but I hear things. But you're right, that is so New Hampshire. I mean, where else would people sign a petition to keep graffiti on a rock?
Well, it's a wonderful roadside landmark.
It is.
Had to have it.
I think if people in other parts of the state have not experienced the great wonder that it is the chicken farmer rock, they may be inspired to do so by your book.
And I have the directions in there.
Yes, you do.
I have no excuse.
No excuse, absolutely none. Yes, yes. That was certainly one of the highlights. But another one for me, my ancestors settled in the seacoast area of New Hampshire, and you have a whole section on the historic homes of Portsmouth, which I think is also valuable in terms of being a guide to people who want to go and look at the houses and see them, or visit the ones that are museums, and learn about the seacoast history, which maybe some people in the capital region or the western part of the state or other parts of the state might not be as familiar with. It feels far away when you're here sometimes. But,
Actually, Margaret, I've worked on the seacoast for several years, and it's been my experience that people on the seacoast don't get out enough.
well, they have no excuse. There's a lot on their doorstep for sure. Definitely. Well, one more thing before we wrap up. I know that Grappone is associated with Concord, with stonecutting, with automotive, but there are also Quincy and Boston connections as well. And one that was interesting to me because I have a sweet tooth with the candy making part of it, and so that was. Were you aware of that part of the family history as well?
I think I had heard some stories about my dad visiting his uncles in Revere area, in Quincy area, and getting some candy. But I did not know that I had a relative in the Candy Hall of Fame.
Is there anything you people can't do?
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Wine and carving and automobiles and candy. All the great things in life. Well, we're so grateful to both of you for being here. It made a great combination to talk about local history and state history, international history, Italian history, and highly recommend to everyone these books, A History Lover's Guide to New Hampshire, and also Growing Up in Concord, New Hampshire, Boomer Memories. So even if you're not a boomer, you'll learn a lot about.
And Amanda Grappone Osmer's book too, Grappone Automotive, The Founding. It's fascinating. It truly is. You won't be able to put it down. And I thank you both for taking the time to share your stories and to write these, because it's really valuable, and for generations to come, giving people an understanding of so much.
It's delightful to be appreciated.
Well, and keep writing so we can have you come back, and best of luck with all of your future projects. We give our thanks to Concord TV for the facility, for our wonderful new table, which we are excited to have, and we're still getting used to. I've been banging on it accidentally throughout the interview. And to Matt, our
wonderful
producer,
Matt, who's always there
in the control room, and also to Josh Hardy, who helped out a little bit at the start when we were having some microphone issues. We are so happy to be part of the Concord TV family.
We are.
And we thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next month, on not next week, on Turning Pages.
Thank you.